Hello, hello, New Haven and the greater New Haven region and wherever people are listening in this Zoom universe. And welcome back to Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. I'm your host, Lucy Gellman, and I am here today with director Noah Golden and cast members M. Cram and Lou DeJesus, and we are talking about Assassins, which is, for better or worse, Noah, I think maybe a little more timely than you thought it might be, and we'll get into that. If you don't know what Assassins is, it is a musical with music and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim and a book by John Weidman. And it is running through Fuse Theater September 20th through the 29th of this year at the Music Back Then Performance Theater Center, which is a really cool place. And I think part of this, I don't want to say renaissance in the arts that West Haven is having. I think West Haven has just always had artists, and folks maybe have not known because New Haven gets a lot of the cultural love. And New Haven's culturally amazing, and we can talk about that too. But Hughes jumped onto the scene Noah, was it 3 years ago? Longer than that.
About 2020.
Yeah. So, and has done some really exciting work. Most recently, you may think about their performance of Falsettos, and they also had just like a musical review either a couple months ago. Yeah, time in my brain is very relative, but we're going to talk about this performance. So first of all, Noah, I'm going to toss it to you. Noah Golden is the director of the show, and for folks who don't know, because our listenership is broad and it includes some musical theater dorks, but also folks who maybe wouldn't go out of their way to see a musical, right? I think musicals have a certain stigma. We can talk about that too. What is Assassins? Tell me, or tell our listeners what Assassins is and why it was really the right show for this fall, which of course, is right before the November 5th presidential election.
Yeah, that was definitely not an accident that we picked the show at this time. Assassins is a musical, as you said, by Stephen Sondheim, music and lyrics, widely considered probably the greatest composer and lyricist for American musical theater, and a book by John Weidman. It is a show about the 9 real-life individuals who tried or succeeded in killing a sitting U.S. president, from John Wilkes Booth to Lee Harvey Oswald, but sort of funnels this story about all their individual lives through a sort of surreal lens in which all of these figures exist together. So characters. The character that M plays, Squeaky Fromm, and the character that Lou plays, Giuseppe Zangara, existed within many decades of each other and wouldn't have interacted in real life. But in this show, they all kind of exist in a universe together and can kind of talk and relate to each other. This show has a little bit of everything. It's really, it deals with some heavy material about political disenfranchisement and what makes people resort to violence and what happens when people feel like they are not seen or heard or listened to. There's a great quote by John Weidman, the book writer, who says that this is a story about what happens when people confuse the right to happiness with the right to obtain happiness. Right? We're given this right to pursue happiness, not the right to all be happy all the time. And what happens when these individuals try to seek their moment of happiness and try to attain their goals, but obviously through a very misguided, violent way. So it has a little bit of everything. It has some really fascinating moments about history and psychology and what draws these people to do what they do. It also has a lot of humor in it. There's some really funny moments, especially moments that M has a bunch of scenes with Sarah Jane Moore, they both tried to kill President Ford, which are really funny scenes. And it's a score that sort of also traces the history of these characters and of the time they were in through the music. So the music that John Wilkes Booth sings is sort of Aaron Copland Americana music. The music that happens in Giuseppe Zangara's era is a Sousa march. The music that Squeaky Fromm and Hinckley sing is like a 1960s sort of soft rock ballad. So the music sort of traces the era of where these characters are. So it's a really fascinating, interesting, dark, weird, surreal show, but it is so well written. And it's the perfect time to bring the show to New Haven. It hasn't been seen in this area since Yale Rep did it in 2016, I believe.
I think
Um,
2017, but it's been a minute.
2017. So it hasn't been seen in this area in a while. And, I have talked to my co my team at Fuse for a long time about this. Has been sort of a dream show for us. And there's just not many shows that are this kind of well written and fascinating and interesting and fun and um, meaty. There's such great meaty roles for everyone. And yet we just thought this was the perfect time to pass up the chance of doing this out an election year when it is the most timely. This show was written in the early 90s, but it could not be more timely to where we are right now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. Em and Lou, I want to bring both of you in. Did you know the show? I mean, Sondheim is known as like the fairy godfather, I guess, of musical theater. There are some like complicated feelings I have about that, but we won't talk about those on this show, right? So were you familiar with the show beforehand? It was written in the 90s, so it's a relatively recent musical.
I actually wasn't familiar with the show. So it was interesting to come into the process really cold, and just kind of take it at face value, and get to learn about it. Like I also purposefully didn't watch any other productions. So, and like Noah's saying, it's really well written. So I think the script and the score lends itself to kind of having a fresh eye on it. So yeah, so that was my perspective and experience throughout the process.
And in my case, it was like I had heard of the show, but I didn't really know because it's not done all that often at all. So like, I of course knew the I am unworthy of your love and like from going to musical theater school and like having seen people do the material and auditions and that sort of thing, but I didn't know too much about it before getting into it.
And are y'all a pretty like political cast? I don't know. I feel like generally speaking, folks in the arts get fired up about politics or about politically adjacent things.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're pretty like justice oriented. I think a lot of the focus has been on like trying to do the best show that we can, and in the limited amount of time that we have. So, um, but I think that's always in the back of our head. We want to send the clearest message possible.
And Noah,
And
have
I
you
think,
oh, go ahead,
sorry,
please.
I was going to say, I think one thing that's really fascinating about this show is that it's obviously very political in sort of the idea of the show, but it's also not sort of a partisan show at all. It's not a show that I think the writers very wisely did not write a script that tries to sort of sum everything up and give you a nice moral at the end. It is not trying to make a blanket statement. It is not a show that is about one side that is right and one side that is wrong. It's very much a show about um, what it means to be disenfranchised and what happens when these kind of ideals of the American dream don't come to fruition. And so I think in that way, it's a really interesting show. It leaves a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, which I think makes a really interesting theater. There's so I think that's also something that's good to know. But yeah, it's something we've definitely talked about. And I mean, it's unavoidable to, we'll host a show at a time when there's an election going on. And, we had our first rehearsal on the day that Biden dropped out of the race, right? So, it's unavoidable. But I think that's also a good point. The show kind of doesn't try to moralize, it tries to raise questions, and it asks you to listen to these people and understand that as misguided and whatever their motivations are, they had a point they were trying to make, and it kind of asks us to listen to these folks.
And you said you'd been thinking about this show for a while. Like, how have you always known, like, okay, one of my dreamy dreams, right, is to do Assassins in or close to a presidential election year?
Not close to a presidential election, but I mean, it's definitely been a show. I think when I joined Fuse, it was kind of one of those shows of like, man, I hope someday we get to do this show. It's kind of, I think we've been really lucky in that the last 3 shows that we've done are really kind of what I think are perfect examples of what we want Fuse to be. They're smaller, they're intimate, they're done by really amazing, well-known writers, but they're not shows that you see every day. And they have a message and something interesting to say. And so it came up this year because of the election. That wasn't always like I wish I could say that was like a 4-year plan. And it wasn't, but it just felt right. And we thought, God, this is a hard show to cast. You need really strong performers, and specifically a lot of male presenting performers, which is very tricky in the community theater space. You don't always get a lot of guys who show up. And we were like, if we can find this cast, this will be an amazing show. And we were really lucky. We found an amazingly talented group of people. So here we are.
Here we are. So I love stories, right? Noah, you know this. I love good stories. So I'm going to toss it to you first, but we're going to kind of do a little bit of a round robin on radio, at least the way my screen is oriented as we're recording this is I can see all of your beautiful faces. And I would love to hear like what it was that hooked all of you about musical theater. Because I don't know, musical theater is a really specific thing. And then also being on stage versus being backstage, and Noah, we'll talk about that, is also a very specific thing. It like both of them take certain kinds of temperaments. And like rarely do the twain meet. Sometimes they do.
Totally. I love that question. I think what I love about being on like the performer side of things, and also specifically with this show, I'm starting to realize is kind of what Noah was saying about like the asking questions. I also love portraying characters that the audience can see themselves in, and like I'm really big on like see and be seen. So I want people to see themselves and have that connection. And honestly, like as a theater performer on stage, getting to look into the audience and see people connecting with the show and having different reactions is really special. So that's kind of what like lights my fire about theater and being an actor. So
Lou, let's hop to you.
For me, I was a little gay boy playing with Barbies but my mom has 7 sisters we're all pretty close in age, and I always got into their toys and I was always playing with Barbies. And little did I know, I was directing plays. I was making costumes. I was playing, defying gravity and having the Barbie with the dark hair up in the air while the blonde one's on the floor with her arm up, like reaching up. And for me, it was always a way to tap into my inner child and never lose that sense of joy and like playing pretend, make believe,
I love that. And then, the choice to go into, so do you find that you're doing, both you and Fuse is a community theater group. And I think that not that many of these spaces exist but they're really important because there are a lot of people who love theater, right? Who don't specifically want to pursue it professionally. And so through Fuse, I've met folks who are largely arts educators. That's a really frequent one because it doesn't pay well, but it usually pays a little better than musical theater. But also like musicians who are cobbling things together and like all of the above. Um, yeah, and also tell me about finding Fuse for both of you because it is sort of this magical space.
I know for me, I initially was going to work with Fuse when they were doing All Together Now, which was, we were all coming back from theater after the infamous pandemic, and we were all getting together. And I was coming on to sing and kind of help out vocally with people a little bit. And I was really, really excited, ran into some personal stuff and just didn't have the time and ended up not being available. But then circling back, I saw they were holding auditions for Assassins. And like I said, I wasn't familiar with Assassins, but all my friends that know Assassins are like, Assassins is fire. So like learning that they were doing Assassins and then like my schedule was freed up and I was between jobs and I was like, what have I got to lose? Let's go have fun, Like
I auditioned for Fuse last year and then had some scheduling issues, so similar to Lou. And then I was doing something with another company that Noah's a part of. And Noah's like, "Do you want to be an Assassins?" And I was like, "Okay." So that's how this came about for me.
And Noah, have you always like I don't know if we've talked a lot about like was it like baby Noah freaking out at Broadway at some point or you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in this kind of stuff. I have always, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I went to like the, NMS theater camp and that kind of stuff when I was little. So I've always kind of done this. And, I remember, like a lot of people seeing shows as a young age and seeing Feel Good Man Charlie Brown on Broadway and being like, I want to do that. I kind of did it up and through as I grew up and mostly as a performer. And then after college, I started to get involved more backstage and assistant directed some shows and then joined Fuse and have gotten to do more behind the scenes stuff, which I really love. As you said, it's like a very, very different muscle. And scratch is a very different itch. But it's so rewarding in a very different way and so fun. I mean, there's nothing kind of more fun than making notes on your, couch in the middle of the night of what you want a show to be, and then you have like all these people doing that show in front of you. Like it's a kind of a crazy thing. But yeah, I think just, there's something about I mean, I love kind of a lot of forms of storytelling. I do video editing in my day job, so that's sort of a thread. But there's something about the sort of immediacy of theater that it's live people in front of you, all kind of coming together to tell the story, and sort of the representational nature that it's maybe it's not realistic like a movie in the same sense, especially this show. And yet, the audience kind of goes on that journey with you. And it made me think when you say that, I remember I was talking about Stephen Sondheim. I remember watching Sweeney Todd when I was like the PBS um, capture of Sweeney Todd when I was, I don't know, an early teenager. And I remember kind of thinking like, oh, a musical can be this, right? I think my idea of a musical before that was happy and dancy and something kind of light and fluffy. And I remember watching that as a young person and being like, oh, a musical can be anything, right? Like it can be about the happy things, and it can be about murder and trauma and struggle and people eating meat pies. And so I think those are the kind of musicals really since then that I've always I've been really drawn to is stuff that is like interesting and has an interesting point of view and says something. Sometimes you want escapist entertainment, and that's great, but the kind of shows that I'm drawn to are usually not those generally.
Yeah, and I do feel like there are, and you're right, there are musicals that are lovely. Um, I've seen, I mean, this is different because it's associated with like Disney and stuff like that, but I think I've seen like 8 productions of Moana Junior because I cover student theater too. And that's of course really sweet, right? But then you also have shows like Assassins, where I feel like Sondheim has this beautiful ability to walk a line between funny, like sometimes I think, okay, if I were explaining this to someone who had like never heard of a musical before, right? And I said, like, yeah, it's a musical about people who tried and sometimes succeeded to murder sitting presidents. But it also has real moments of levity. People would be like, "Oh, you're crazy," right? Um,
Yeah.
and and then speaking of that, and on that same line, I also, as we're talking about this, just keep thinking about Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, which is a musical that I always thought should have done much better than it did do, but that's Broadway for you. But as we're talking about this, y'all have been practicing the or rehearsing this during a crazy, like what has turned out to be a crazy election season. 2 months ago, we did not specifically think it was going to be a crazy election season. There were these 2 octogenarians who kind of like no one really wanted to vote for. I think that there's a national consensus on that, like no matter where folks are um, on the partisan divide. Uh, and it felt like, oh, we have the same choice that we had 4 years ago. And people were not super happy. And then crazy stuff happened. Um, I mean, in part, and this is a horrible statement on like political violence in America today, right? Um, there was an assassination attempt, or what appears to have been an assassination attempt, which is terrifying. That I just think gun violence is terrifying wherever you are on the political spectrum. And then Biden drops out. And then I don't know if you've rehearsed since Tuesday, but also there was a wild debate where it was just 90 minutes of like WTF, right? And so how has it felt to hold this show and rehearse the show and also be bringing it, like be midwifing it into being right now? Sorry, that was like 5 questions at once. Anyone can go.
I mean, I guess I can start. Yeah, it is a lot, and I think one of the things that it's a lot, but I think one of the things we've talked about, which is fascinating about the show is kind of a good reminder that we all like to think that this is the most unpredictable political time in our history, and everything is we've never seen anything like this before. And this show is kind of a good reminder that everything old is new again. Our country has been through this many, many, many times in various ways. And it gets quoted in our show, but in in John Wilkes Booth's diary that he wrote after he killed Lincoln, one of the direct quotes is, "This country is not what it was. This forced union is not the union that I grew up in and loved." I'm paraphrasing slightly, but and I mean that's a statement that could be from either side of like a January 6th riot, right? So I think that's been an interesting thing to talk about in this is that yes, it's like these kind of unprecedented times, but it's also not. And this country has been through so much upheaval and these cycles of political unrest and being unsure, and the grievances that some of these characters had 100 years ago, 200 years ago, are still grievances that you know we have today. Pass it along.
Just think, I know, so there's a lot of heavy material happening in the show. And we've had a lot of conversations surrounding that. But I think kind of floating in the air is the idea of like art imitating reality and how exciting that is to be able to bring that to this area of Connecticut and just the people in general. So I think like that's my experience in the process, is just getting to kind of like be with a really strong group of people and like work on this material and know that we're going to get to share it with people. And it's exciting. And especially in this climate.
Absolutely. Like, as Noah has said in rehearsal time and time again, things haven't really changed. Like, I know specifically in my number, which if you come to see the show, you'll see everyone's kind of taking credit for what could have happened. And it's no different than, people on TikTok going, I have the exclusive on Gypsy Rose Blanchard, trying to get engagement, trying to get likes. And have we really changed? And that's such an interesting concept within the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, I also want to ask both of you what it feels like to play these characters, but do you think, Noah, I am really interested by this question of like, is it a singularly bad moment in history? Because I know both as a parent to a young kid and like as a reporter, I'm like, the world is crazy. Was it always this crazy? It's crazy. Does it feel different? I think especially with the climate crisis, maybe something feels different to me. But does it, especially now with the political perspective that you have, do you feel like, oh, maybe this isn't like as singularly horrible as I thought it was?
I mean, I think that's a really good, deep, thorny question that I don't know if I have the means to answer. But I think that I mean, I think there's both are sort of true. I think one thing we talked about this last night actually. I mean, I think the fact that sort of media, the way media and social media exists changes a lot of this, right? I think in McKinley was shot, it had the country had to wait for the newspapers to come out. So, they grieved his death and it was a big thing, but it's very different than people hopping on Twitter and, TikTok 5 minutes after an event and voicing their um, opinions, especially because I think, this show, um, as we talked about in rehearsals, like the most uh, repeated word in this whole show is listen. These are all people who are begging anyone to listen to them. And no one is really listening to them. And so, social media gives everyone a platform for people to be heard and listened to. So I think that definitely changes things. We were talking about that last night with JFK, right? There's a difference with his death because it was televised, and the news was televised and people could watch that. So I think, that definitely changes things. But I think the feelings probably haven't changed as much. It just is a much easier way to get yourself heard and get your opinions out there that didn't exist. But I think that's a really interesting question.
And Em and Lou, I want to ask you, I think all the time about this person who I knew in high school. I did like tech theater in high school, and then I got to college and I was like, oh, this is actually really hard when you're trying to do it on a semi-professional level. And I stopped. But she was playing Miss Hannigan, who, if people don't know who Miss Hannigan is, it's the really mean one in Annie. That's all you need to know. And she was having so much fun. And I always thought like I would really hate to get on stage and play this like pretty evil person. But for both of you, how is it to play these historically maligned, sort of despised and perhaps misunderstood, right? We all know what Lin-Manuel Miranda has done with Aaron Burr, characters.
Well, I think that it's important as an actor, at least in my training, you can't play a negative. It's not playable, it's not active on stage, it's not interesting to watch, and it's a dead end. And you end up running in circles, and all your scenes are the same. There's no range. And then you have essentially 2 hours of people that no one cares about. And who wants to watch that? So a lot of times when you're playing someone who can be perceived as a villain, that's the other people they're interacting with villainizing them. You have to think when you're an actor, what's my objective? How do I get what I want? How do I get what I want? What am I willing to risk? What's important to me? So you can't play it in your mind as like, especially playing a character like Zingara, where a lot of articles kind of allude to the idea that he would have pled insanity or been crazy, for lack of better words. You can't just kind of make your eyes big and shake your head and be like, I'm crazy, I'm scary. Like it doesn't, it's not effective. He's singing real lyrics. He's a real person. He lived, he had hopes, he had dreams. And playing that as true and as active as you can just further serves the story. And I think it's all perception, really. And that's really what's interesting about the show to me.
I this is one of the most like interesting processes I've had kind of like locking into a character. And I've really struggled with it. But I also think what I have found throughout the process is the whole concept of like I too am that. Like when you really strip it down, like we're all the same. So kind of what Lou is saying, like when you really look at the objective, like it's really relatable. Like when you strip it down, and so in that sense, it's really easy to play these people because they're just like us. It's just like the circumstances are heightened, and things ensue that like maybe the everyday person wouldn't experience. And I also think with this piece specifically, I'm hoping the audience has a similar experience where they also realize how close to home some of these people live. Um, so yeah, I agree. I love playing like off the beaten path characters. I think that's so fun.
And do you feel like you learn, I mean, both of you have learned, because like Lynette From, right, who you're playing,
Yeah.
is endlessly interesting,
Endlessly interesting.
right? Like she was in a cult,
Yeah.
the Manson cult, which is probably like one of the, I was gonna say better known, like, I don't know. I hope that there are not people out there who have indexical knowledge of cults, but I'm sure that there are. Um, and and so there's also the question of like traumatized people enacting trauma on other people.
Mhm.
Um, and Zangara, I did not know this until I did a quick Google. Thank you, Google. Did kill the mayor of Chicago because he missed his target, which is like also that's it goes uh, to show like gun violence is terrifying. Just
Well, I think it's important to note that in Zara's case, he didn't care who it was, as long as it was someone with money. And what's so interesting about him as well is this idea of, being an immigrant coming here, working so hard, and he really has this hate, this bitterness towards capitalism, towards people with money, towards people that are so greedy about money. And so it's like, yes, he missed his target. Several shots were fired. He missed his target, which was Roosevelt. But in killing the mayor and him, he was kind of like a win's a win, which is awful, but it's the reality of the situation.
it's awful, but going back to Noah's earlier point, I think it speaks to the fact that like it we're at a point right now, actually, with something like capitalism, for instance, where if you think about like so there was this book about the limits to economic growth, and we're sort of hitting up against that, right? But this is like there have always been people who hated capitalism, um, and like who were so angry about it that they would enact violence, right? And so it's interesting to think about that. I'm just going to remind folks, if you're just joining us or if you've been listening, we are on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. This is Arts Respond. I'm Lucy Gellman, your host, and I am here with director, words are hard, y'all, Noah Golden, and actors Cram, sorry, and Lou DeJesus, and we are talking about Assassins, which is running through Fuse Theater of Connecticut, September 20th through the 29th at the Music Back Then Performance Theater in West Haven. So for all of you also like, I don't know, how are you feeling going into the last week? It's like y'all are about to start tech, right?
We sure are.
How does that feel?
Honestly, really exciting. I think I don't know, I can't remember who said it last night at rehearsal, but I feel like we're really ready for this to be on the stage and be in the set and be really leaning into the stakes of the situation. and all the things that come with Tech Week and opening a show. So I think we're really ready.
And Noah, talk to us a little bit about what folks can expect as far as a set, because one of the really fun things, a set and your direction of the show, one of the fun things about being behind the scenes is you get this show that is fully formed, right? But you get to make it your own. I mean, this is true of actors too. Every time you step onto the stage, you get to make that character your own. So for you, what are some things that folks can maybe expect without giving away, like,
Yeah.
don't give away any
Yeah,
spoilers that you want to
can't give away all the spoilers. Yeah, I think, one thing that really appealed to me about the show as a director is this show is really like a playground for a director and designers. And there's a lot of shows that are um, great shows, but they're always kind of going to be what they are. I don't know, Mary Poppins is always going to be a flop edition on, right? Like there's not that many ways you can do that show. Um, and even shows that I love that are very they kind of are what they are. And this show is not like that. There is a lot of ways to stage the show, and there's a lot of ways to um, contextualize it and design it. And so our set is by an amazing set designer and set painter named April Chateauneuf, who's a set painter for Goodspeed Opera House. And she has designed our set, and there was a kind of a vaguely carnival-like atmosphere of the set and of the show. The show opens in a kind of carnival-like setting. And there's a character called the proprietor, who is sort of a carnival barker-esque character, who's sort of enticing all of the assassins to come on stage. And so our set is a little bit carnival. It's a little like roadside political rallies, kind of faded red, white, and blue wood, but it's all supposed to be a little off and a little eroded and a little seedy. And so it's been really fun to like make those kind of choices. And we've done some really interesting things with the guns in our show, because there's obviously a good amount of guns in this show, and gunshots. And so we are using wooden guns that don't necessarily look realistic, because one of my thoughts is like prop guns never look that good. Like they always kind of look fake. So we're using these kind of purposefully fake looking, kind of almost toy like wooden guns. And we are doing the gunshots in an interesting way that I won't give away here, but we're kind of doing something fun with the gunshots. It's a very kind of stripped down. My goal is really to like strip the show down, use kind of as little things as possible, and touches where I can to connect all these pieces, because it is a kind of a loose structure of this show, so you need things in place to sort of connect everything and make it feel as a whole. But it was really to set the tone up and let the actors do their thing. We have a great cast, and so I said to them at the beginning, like, my goal is to give you the structure and give you the 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 the, the frame, and really you guys are responsible for building the house. So yeah, so that's a little bit about our production. And we have an 8-piece band, and a wonderful tech crew who is helping us as well. Music Back Then is a wonderful space in West Haven that is open for, they mostly have done a lot of concerts and things there. We're kind of the first like big musical that's coming in. And they've been wonderful to us. So it's really exciting to go into tech.
And are any or all of you people who like before this spent time at, at political rallies or doing work that feels inherently political?
Yeah, I mean 2020, I actually was in New York for from 2020 to like 2020, end of 2021-ish, and then I moved to Connecticut. So I was very involved with the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the things going on in 2020. And also this year, I mean, I went to Pride, and a bunch of those marches were politically oriented. And so definitely, for sure, very involved.
Same thing here in 2020. I was in all the things. I mean, there wasn't, once the pandemic hit, there wasn't much I could do other than, repost, share, that sort of thing. I do my best to, donate to a couple LGBTQ charities every year because, I'm one of them and, we got to help each other, the sisters, we all got to take care of each other. And yeah, I think that for me, it's that people always know how I feel politically because I'm, as you can tell, very outspoken. So yeah.
You don't mince words. I love it. I mean, really, who has time for that, right? And no, I mean, Noah, you too. And do you feel like this has inspired y'all to either do more political stuff or go, to a rally? I remember, I mean, this was horrible. But for a long time in 2020, that there were a bunch of Trump voters who would like congregate in the IKEA parking lot on weekends, which I mean, it's a lot of space. It's like a lot of space where you can, but it was just like avoid Long Wharf for a while if you want to. Yeah.
My favorite thing
It's
now
not good
is,
for you if you.
oh,
I
so go
hope no
ahead.
one wants a Swedish meatball or something. Yeah, have to
I
avoid it.
know. Or just get your Swedish meatballs on Sunday, or
Well,
like Friday or Sunday. Just skip. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it, and I think it reinforces, that all art is political, or most art is political, and that if it takes a lot of time and effort to put shows together and to make things,
Yeah, it does.
and that to work on projects that are meaningful and say something. And we did Falsettos last year, which is a show about uh, a gay man in the 80s, and it involves AIDS and things like that. And we did a number of like pride events and things like that last year. And we had people come up to us afterwards who said they experienced a similar story in their life, and this helped them kind of see things from a different angle, and made them think differently about things in their own life or their own family. And I mean, I think that's kind of all you want when you do this kind of work, is to touch people and make people think. And, to go back to a point Lou was making about, you can't play a villain. None of these people in this show walk around thinking they're the villain. None of them walking around thinking they're, a deranged killer who people revile. Like, they walk around thinking they have a point to make, and they walk around thinking, many of them, that they're going to be a hero. Gateau and Booth and a lot of these people thought, if I do this, people are going to embrace me, and so it's very easy to sort of demonize, and many of these people, rightfully so, because they did horrible things. But this is a good show and a good example of kind of letting people tell those stories and what we can learn from them.
So also one thing that I love to ask folks just as we wind down is how do all of you take care of your hearts? Like how do you like maybe this is one of the ways, but this is also, as you said, it's a show that can feel really heavy. And then it's not like you can disconnect from the show and be like, oh, society feels so good. Or at least that's not my experience, right? The world feels very much on fire right now. And so you're doing this show that I imagine is like emotionally it demands a lot from you. And then you're going back into society, which is a mess. So how do y'all take care of your hearts?
I think Lou, you said something about this last night. Yeah.
Yes, I did. I'm a Disney film comfort watcher. I'm a Disney boy in my heart through and through. If I have a long day or a long rehearsal, I will, problematic as it is, the score is beautiful. I will just put on Pocahontas and fall asleep to the colors of the wind because there's just little things where when you're in that character and you're in that world and someone who is very aggressive, who has a lot of bitterness, who has a lot of resent and spite towards other people and towards how they feel about the world, that's a big feat to go and put 150% into it. And especially doing, a big song with big singing, and it's a lot of energy. So it's like when you're in that world, and a lot of the show is kind of in like a limbo and you're just creating, it's all very dark. So I'm someone who I need that light. I need to watch Barbie Rapunzel, like I need that bit of like, okay, it's okay, pink pony, happy sky.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this cast has been really great with like checking in on each other and making space for each other. And yeah, it's been lovely connecting with these people. And I think for me, same, I love Disney movies. I love a good um, throwback to the good old days when like DComs were a thing. Yeah, and also just spending time with the cast in a lighthearted manner, like going to grab a drink after rehearsal, spending time with your loved ones, all that stuff, eating well, sleeping well, all the things.
Noah, take us home.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of sleep. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Em. I think, even though it's heavy, it doesn't feel, I don't know, the rehearsal room to me has never felt like kind of dour. And, we've had a lot of, it's fun, and we're able to laugh together and work together. And so, and this is a really great group who is not just like really talented and professional level talent, and collaborative, but just been kind and easy to work with and fun and collaborative. And so it's never felt like a chore. And, we try to serve the story as best as possible and get some distance from it and to talk about our questions and concerns. But it's really been a joy, and I hope people in the New Haven area will enjoy it. And we have 6 shows for you guys in West Haven. We have 2 ASL interpreted shows, by the way, on the first Sunday and the second Friday, which is really exciting. We've never done that before, and we've always kind of wanted to do that. So more ways to make the show accessible to more people. But we really hope that the audiences will enjoy it and get something out of it and make them think, and see what community theater can offer, right? Community theater means a lot of things, and this isn't sort of your typical community theater show. And I think people will be really um, impressed and interested in what we got going on.
I love that. So, whether you've been with us for this whole time or you're just joining us, sorry, you missed a great episode. Please go back and listen. It's been Arts Respond. I'm your host, Lucy Gellman, and we are on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. It's a collaboration with the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. And we were talking today about Fuse Theater of Connecticut's presentation production of Assassins, which runs September 20th through 29th at the Music Back Then Performance Theater. If you've never heard of that space, it's at 221 Bull Hill Lane in West Haven, Connecticut. You can also find the good folks of Fuse at Fuse Theater CT. That's like no spaces.org, or on Instagram at, I don't know what Instagram is, at Fuse Theater CT. Thank you all so much. I so appreciate this. Y'all, if you're listening and if you don't think it's interesting, I don't know, shift your mindset about musical theater, just open yourself to it and go to this performance. Tickets are on Fuse's website. Noah, anything that I missed if folks need to find y'all, and they should?
I don't think so. FuseTheaterCT.org. It's theater with an RE.
Yes.
And yeah, find us online. Thank you so much, Lucy, for having us. It's been great, and hope to see you all there.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.